A social worker has kicked off a social work course for saying homosexuality is a sin on his Facebook. Was this the right decision by the university, or was it social engineering by another means? This week's ORT. Organize, sit down, reason and talk. With me today is Kindred Spirit and Ebony Harmony, who was in the studio as she wasn't able to make it today. We pick up the conversation with me introducing the topic.
His white colleague saw the post on Facebook, reported it to the university in Sheffield, and he was duly expelled, although they went through a process which allowed him to challenge the outcome, but the court process fell in line with the university. And what I wanted to concentrate on today was the role of the university in facilitating debate, because on the surface you would say that views that may seem extreme should be able to be spoken about within the university, and is our universities robust enough to challenge that, especially for people of African ascendancy, because of our relationship to the Bible, our indoctrination to the Bible. And for me, we haven't been able to untangle that. We haven't been able to look at our relationship in any formal context within the educational system around what I would term brainwashing and what I would call radical Christianity, quite similar to Islamic State, that you didn't have a choice. You had to change your name, you had to take the culture, you had to take the religion on. And here we know of a person of African ascendancy who is defending a Greco-Roman version of religion and being expelled from a European university on the basis of a religion that he was taught by Europeans. Now, I've spoken to the individual, I contacted him, and what he said was, listen, he's got 3 degrees already, this was his 4th degree, which would indicate that he has some level of ability to take part in discourse. And he came from Cameroon. He became a Christian of his own volition. His parents were not Christian. His parents did become Christian some years later because his sister died, and in his own words, she died. They took her to church, people prayed for her, and she came back to life. So the parents then became Christians. So during his time in Cameroon, he's witnessed people going missing who have spoken against the government, and he came to the United Kingdom. I'm not sure by what means, but he held the United Kingdom as a bastion of freedom of speech. So that is the backdrop to it. So what's your view on that?
I think there's so many angles that you could come at this from, because it's such a hot topic. But the one that really stands out for me is this question: what is an academic institution for? Mm-hmm. What is a learning environment for, if not to share and critique, discuss ideas? And this man's experience, right, and it's not, the extent to which it's gone to me is extreme, but it's not an isolated incident in terms of the message that's coming across, in that there appears to be some topics now that you're not allowed to touch within an academic environment. So what's the point of it if you can't, and especially given the profession that this man is going into, if you can't discuss it on the course of study, where can you discuss it, and why can't you talk about it? This man is going to be working with a diverse range of people. Surely that's the place.
Yeah, you would think so. I suppose one of the questions is, how do you protect vulnerable groups?
That's a really interesting question, because it's it presupposes that if you have a particular view, you are automatically going to discriminate against whoever you hold that view about. And if you work in if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, if you work in any of those kind of welfare type professions, you're going to come across people whose lifestyle, whose beliefs you don't necessarily agree with. Does it stop you helping?
I think, considering the course that he he was taking, and also his professional field. I think some may argue that this is precisely why he shouldn't have, made his views so abundantly clear. And in fact, I'd go further as to say that the expectations as a qualified social worker and part of the qualifying requirement is that you don't hold views that are discriminatory or judgmental.
Really?
From what I understand and from what I know of the profession, the expectation would be that he shouldn't, although it's not realistic. I mean, let's be real.
Okay.
Do we really believe that all social workers are, accepting of everything? But the expectation is that certainly if you do hold those views, that one wouldn't express them so abundantly and so open. And I take on what you said about, university should be the place for discussion and so forth, and I completely wholeheartedly agree with you, because that's where the learning will come from, or should come from, and the understanding should come from. But I think, unfortunately, him posting what he did post, it wasn't much of a discussion. It's so unfortunate and quite unfair to him, because he was indeed, from what I understand, quoting something from the Bible, the standard from the Bible, part of the Christian belief. He was quoting that, so it wasn't as such him being discriminatory. So, this argument is quite broad. I think society expects that as individuals we have to be all things to all men, depending on what the trend of that time is.
Interesting question.
If you work in probation, you're going to come across people who have committed crimes that are going to turn your stomach. Does it stop you working for them? What about these people who
should he have kept his big mouth shut?
Well, it would have got him through the course, but it would not have done anything to help him question some of those ideas that he's got and understand his own journey as to why he came to have those, and open up at least a discussion in his own mind about what his beliefs might be based on. That's a more meaningful process for me, because if you're just going to shut him down, then you're actually denying him the opportunity as well to actually think about, well, hold on, why do I think that, and what are my views based on, and give him the opportunity to explore that. But you've just shut him down. So if anything, you've reinforced the very views in him that you're actually trying to challenge.
Yeah.
Because you haven't given any opportunity for him and anybody else he's on that course with to really unpick that a bit and look at it in a more meaningful way.
Yes, indeed. And it's really quite concerning, because this is a caring profession, and this type of response is actually fostering a degree of, professionals who are disingenuous. It also, I think, really narrows the field for actually identifying perhaps students who may well be of concern, because you've now pre-armed people and forewarned people that, really to keep a tight lid on what you really think and what you actually believe, and thus how you're actually going to behave when you're out there as a professional, a qualified professional. It's really quite concerning.
One of the things that he said to me was that he now feels that unless you're falling on the side of liberalism, then you don't stand much of a chance. But one of the questions begs is around the timeline. So if you're on a 3-year degree course and you start at day 1 thinking that homosexuality is a sin, and you're 2.5 years through and you're still thinking that homosexuality is a sin, then the question begs as to what position does a university take?
Precisely.
A university might not necessarily change someone's view, but the purpose of the university is to encourage critical analysis. That's the place where it's supposed to happen. So it's not, there's no kind of assumption that after 3 years you're necessarily going to have a different view, but you might have a different perspective as to why you have that view. You know, it could
Yeah.
open up a number of
Absolutely.
different avenues. So the fact that you're not even allowing that process to take place, and it's not just him, because I'm sure there will be other people on his course who probably had similar ideas but just decided not to, that wasn't the time or the place to air it. So by shutting it down, you're actually encouraging the kind of, I don't know, blinkered thinking, quote unquote, that you're attempting to be appearing to challenge.
Absolutely. I asked myself, what is it really that the university is responding to?
What do you mean?
Are they really responding to this young lady or this woman who's claimed to be offended by what was posted? Or are they responding to the funders of the university, the government, the stakeholders? Are they responding to that? Because at the end of the day, I think, you know, it's clear to see that there is a particular agenda, because it just seems quite punitive. So I feel as if there is something quite broader than what meets the eye, so to speak.
Okay, another part of this now is the race issue. For me, I think there is something familiar around the black-white relationships in the workplace and whether there is enough trust between the two races. I mean, it's really interesting because what he said to me was, this person who told the university was somebody who is also on his Facebook. They've gone out, they've had lunch, they've built a relationship. And I think that it's not unfamiliar that white people will take a stance which is opposite to yours and not speak to you first about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that resonates with you, but
I think that's true, and I think that I think he dropped his guard, and I think that he has made an assumption that his basis for that friendship is exactly the same as that white person's, that they're coming at it on a level playing
We've got a
field.
mutual
Yeah.
understanding of what the
And he's
relationship's
learned
about.
a very harsh lesson that you can never ever assume that. Because it would have been the simplest thing in the world for that person to sit down with him and say, I saw you wrote this, you know, how come you think that? What's that about? But they chose not to do it. They deliberately chose to do something that they knew would bring down a whole heap of trouble on this man, and it has. And I bet to this day they haven't had a conversation with him about it.
And not to stray too far from the point, the racial element we're now speaking about, but I can't help wondering how isolated this response is, and whether this episode, this incident, has in any way impacted on the university's policies. Because surely, if the concern was such, I think this is more than the woman saying she was offended. If it, you know, and if it's, you know, his views are really central to the studies and the social work ethics and so forth, I wonder how it's impacted, and in so much as is something now written into their policy for the future. Okay. Has there been any attempt or consideration given to look at all the students' Facebook's account, you know, and see what views they've posted there? Because surely, if the concern is such that you're going to dismiss a graduate, a 3-time, university degree graduate from a course on pretty much say-so of somebody who was offended, then we really have to be careful about everything. And surely wouldn't you then be looking at writing that into your policy and protecting students and the university and their ethics and so forth? Surely you'd broaden that investigation and look at all the students' Facebook accounts.
And another element around it, not so much about race, but about kind of dynamics, is I wasn't surprised to hear that a person from Africa had this level of naivety around, one, making the comment on Facebook, and two, underestimating the quality of the relationship with this white person.
It is interesting because you say he's already got 3 degrees.
Yeah.
So he's been through learning environments before. I don't know where he studied.
It was United Kingdom.
So it's interesting to me that he's not picked up on the dynamic that exists.
Really?
In these
Well, like I said, I'm not going to name any nations, but I've come across many indigenous African people who somehow don't see any difficulties in relationships with European people.
Because their focus is on their academic study and attaining whatever qualification they're seeking. They're not picking up on the environment in which they are trying to achieve that in. So they're missing a lot of these social kind of cues and these markers that those of us who were born and raised here have come to recognise quite easily. Yeah. They're missing them, and it's, in this case, it's been to his cost.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I mean, education is everything. It is the be-all and end-all, because knowledge is power. But it needs to be the right education. And I think that the brainwashing will continue as long as we don't have our own schools, because I think the sufficient level of black history will never be taught in mainstream schools or even private schooling. Okay. I think we really have to make an investment in ourselves, in our future and in our children, and begin to build our own schools. Or to develop our own educational establishments. So education is everything, but it's got to be the right education, because the European education system is developed and construed and targeted to bring about a certain way of thinking and behaviours by the masses. So it benefits the Europeans. It doesn't benefit them or their society to have us know very much of the truth about ourselves and our abilities and our contributions and our significant existence in society and creation and so forth. It in no way benefits them, so we'll never get that from them. This has to come from us.
And one of the other elements that came up, which I discussed with him, did he ever think that he was pushing the wrong envelope? And by that I mean, Christianity as it is being designed is not indigenous to African intellectual development or African arguments. It's not evolved from them. It was designed through Rome. And in a sense, it's like you're pushing something onto a set of people who actually it's their culture, it's their belief, it was their design. He did not consider the fact of the historical context of Christianity as it now stands, in that people have been introduced to it during the 1600s. Again, a familiar pattern. Not just people from Africa, some African Caribbeans as well. Yeah. They have difficulty in seeing this. Like I said, the Islamic State, it's all over the news. They're trying to indoctrinate people into Muslim. They can see that, but they cannot see it with themselves.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's the real story. That's the real core of this story. Not specifically his views on homosexuality, but where that comes from, and his ability to stop and analyse that and think, well, hold on a second. And how he then applies that to the environment that he's in now. Yeah. That's where the real issue, because he can think whatever he thinks about anything, but does he actually understand his own evolution?
Yeah. How he came to think the way he thinks,
Because that's the thing that he's going to have to carry with him no matter where he is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real crux.
Can I come in there a moment? Because it was more about control, the opportunity, or I think the space to question. I don't believe what was there.
Okay.
And Christianity hasn't changed. I mean, it's been constant in terms of, the Bible says what it says. I mean, it changes where society wants it to change, accepts what it wants you to accept, and so forth. But I take on your point about him not so much thinking where his views have come from and so forth. And has he even recognised them as views, or is it just all encapsulated? In the religion?
Okay.
And living by that religion and the laws of that religion. I think very few people are even considering what is really a reality of what you're saying, Kush-I, that they have been radicalised. It's almost radicalisation. Really, if we think about it, it's much the same thing.
And for our community, I mean, I think that there is something that's been overlooked in terms of when we're going to these institutions, that they have a very narrow view. They are designed to produce people who can have some value in the economy.
Yeah.
Even though the economy does not economize, but they have to produce some kind of economic value. We go in there without wanting to address our historical condition.
That's true.
And
Precisely.
on social work courses of our courses, you would think that it would be able to have to look at the history of how certain groups came to understand what they currently understand.
Yeah.
And we continuously raise our children to say, listen, you have to get a degree, you have to go to college.
Yeah.
But what about our historical perspective? What about our history, or what about our brainwashing and the radicalization that we've been through during?
It's true, because I think there is the brainwashing kind of steers people down this path of education is all.
Mm-hmm.
That is what will liberate.
And it may
you.
be, it may be. Africans created universities.
But that's the focus. And what type of education is it that's going to liberate you? B, are you going to get that education in the institutions that we are in?
Yes.
Right, because education covers a
It's very broad.
Yeah, it has to be a specific type of education.
Yeah.
And when we go into these institutions and we put our children into them, is that at the forefront of our minds in terms of, yes, they come out with a piece of paper, but you also want them to be a functioning human being who can understand certain things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you've got 5 degrees, does it?
Yeah.
He's more vulnerable than a lot of other people because
Yeah.
he hasn't understood
Yeah.
the context that he's in here, and that's a worry.
And it's interesting you said about functioning human beings, because social work, one of the aims of teaching students in a social work course is that they're able to critique society. They're able to challenge things within from a social work perspective, whether it's about the bedroom tax, whether it's about the jungle in Calais, whether it's about immigrants in Lampedusa, whether it's about Brexit. The idea is that social workers and social work students are able to look at these phenomena and critique them from a multitude of perspectives, whether it's economic, historical perspectives, racial perspectives. They're meant to do that. And here it seems like what they're saying, the subtext to all of this is, however you came to be a Christian and however that has shaped your outlook doesn't have any bearing whilst you're on this course.
Can I just add to that?
It's a complete contradiction.
Well, for me, I think it really has reminded me, and I hope it serves to remind us all, that society, European society per se, it will give you with one hand. You know, we have the universities that are available to us. We have the student funding if we don't have the funds up front, and so forth. They will give to us, but they will also take with the other hand. And I think we have to go right back to our traditions and remember that one hand washes the other, and we have to be doing for ourselves and each other.
But as well, on the one hand, yes, the aim should be to empower people to critique certain political ideas, religious ideas, whatever. But what's running alongside that is that the focus for those things is getting narrower and narrower and narrower.
The economy is dictating the terms. Yeah.
So actually, there is a line that you are expected to toe, even though nobody is explicitly saying that.
Yeah. So should we have our own universities then that will allow people to look at their trajectory, how they came to this part, as well as learning the topic?
We absolutely should, and we did at one stage in our evolution, because it's not enough to have schools that are ours simply because or everybody going there is the same colour. It has to be a particular ideology,
Right.
because you're not going to have the space to really explore this anywhere else. And why are they going to allow us that space? It doesn't serve them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They've got no incentive
Yeah.
to change
Nothing
their
in it
modus
for them.
operandi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, final word. I mean, what has this story left you thinking? What would you change? What would you do differently?
For me, it's been an unfortunate reminder actually about the fact that we're not having some of the discussions that you would expect to be having, and why. And for me, I need to be questioning that a bit more openly now, saying, well, why can't we talk about it?
Yeah.
What's going to happen if we talk about it? What's the fear
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
Because really hadn't, it's not until this came up, I really had to sit and think about this, about how much it is getting locked down.
Yeah, yeah. How much you're still on the concentration camp.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, for me, what I will do now as a result of this is, when I come across Christians, is just to ask them to look into the Council of Nicaea and the manufacturing of Jesus Christ and the whole Christian narrative, and just go and look.
Give thanks once again, Kush-I, and goodbye to all your listeners. And Kindred Spirit, wonderful speaking with you again, and look forward to the next time. Goodbye.
Organize, sit down, reason and talk. Included below are links referring to this topic. And remember, comment, share and subscribe. And always, talk the thing.